All right. Well, I said I'd wait 1 minute, and that's all we're going to wait. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us for the very last WA meetup of 2025. Hard to believe that it's already the beginning of December. But here we are, and very excited for the program that we have today. Dawn Marie Maurer from the Department of Ecology has graciously agreed to go over um, some of the components of the current ongoing rulemaking process around solid waste handling standards that are relevant to this audience. So, if you didn't know that you were coming here to talk about on-farm slaughter and there might be a photo, bail out now. As you saw, this meeting is being recorded, so you're welcome to be on camera, off camera. I believe the chat is open, but just know that that'll be part of the recording as well. So to get us started, welcome to WA Meetup. Today, I'm going to do a little welcome and introduction. If this is your first time coming to a WA Meetup meeting, you might not know me and you might not know what exactly WA Meetup is. So I'll tell you a little bit about it and then we'll dive right into the good stuff. Dawn Marie is going to talk about the rulemaking process because I think that could be a new thing for a lot of us here on this call. Talk about the specific updates to this WAC 173.350, which is a solid waste handling standards. And then we'll leave time for Q&A and share at the end how you can submit further comments or feedback if you're interested in commenting on this rulemaking. But first, I'd love to know a little bit about who's here. So I'm going to launch a poll and feel free to answer this at will. And in a couple of slides, I will share the results. Folks can see the poll or being invited to answer it, maybe. Okay. All right. So first, a little bit about me. My name is Sarah Lemon. I'm the local meat marketing and capacity specialist with the Washington State Department of Agriculture. I work for what's called our regional markets program, which is the part of WSDA that supports the economic viability of small and direct marketing farms. Our goal is to increase the availability of Washington grown products for all Washingtonians, but especially in schools and institutions. And we're here to really help you with whatever you need to make sure that your farm or food business continues to be viable into the future. Specifically, I am part of the Meat and Poultry Assistance Program. We were started by the Washington State Legislature in 2021, and I'm here basically to support you. So anybody that is a small or direct marketing meat and poultry producer or a meat processor that we know are essential to getting that meat from the field to the table, I'm here to support you. So if you have any questions, you're wondering yourself, how do I do this? Or can I do this? Or you just want to have a thought partner for different enterprises or get connected to more business resources, training resources, you can call an email, or you can book directly online to meet with me, and I'll happily share whatever I can with you and point you in the right direction. As okay, so now I will share the poll results. So if you haven't done the poll, last minute, looks like answers aren't coming in super close. End poll, share results. So it looks like we've got folks here that produce a lot of beef, some poultry, sheep, pork, and some folks that are just interested in learning more about this topic. A lot of farmers and ranchers, resource providers, a lot of folks that are doing WSDA custom, which is great because you're probably going to be operating in the custom system if you're doing on-farm slaughter. So you found the right place. And let's just see a snippet of who's here or where folks are from. Oh, okay. Townsend, Walla Walla, Ellensburg, Olympia, Monroe, all over the country. That's awesome. Or sorry, the state. Jeez. All over the country would be quite a feat for Wamita. So let me stop and go back to the PowerPoint. Just a second. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. And again, as I said, if this is your first WA meetup, you might be wondering what WA Meetup is exactly. It's a collaborative that was started in 2019 by WSU Food Systems and WSDA Regional Markets. And we like to think of it kind of as a big tent where anybody that cares about having a thriving local meat economy can come together and solve the challenges like waste management that we're facing in the industry. So whether you're a farmer, rancher, meat producer, eater, policymaker like Dawn Marie and myself, legislature, you name it, you're welcome at WA Meetup, and we value your opinion. It's a great place to find information like what we're doing today. Also a great place to just network, meet with other producers and processors that are in maybe a similar situation, share ideas, and come together. So if you're not clued into WA Meetup yet, you can visit us online at www.wameetup.com. I'll throw that link in the chat in just a second. And you can also follow us on Facebook. And then also, I send out through the Regional Markets Program a monthly-ish newsletter of important media opportunities, both for meat producers and meat processors, and often share WA Meetup opportunities on there as well. And if you see us at a conference or a trade show, come and pick up one of these stickers of this awesome logo that was designed by Nicole Witham at the Chimacum Corner Farm Store. And with that, I think it's time to turn it over to Dawn Marie. Yes, as I said, on to the good stuff. Oops. Um, so I warned you at the beginning that there might be some piles of offal. Yeah, so this really is focused on uh, composting of waste that is generated on farm from your own animals. And Dawn Marie will talk a lot more about the changes that we're seeing. So let's give a big warm WA Meetup welcome to Dawn Marie Maurer from Department of Ecology.
Thank you, everybody, for having me here today. I have been really passionate that during this rulemaking process, that the only voices that ecology hears should not be the biggest players in the compost industry. So we have had a lot of participation from some of our major commercial composters like Cedar Grove. We've had a lot of participation from some of our big municipalities and counties like King County and City of Seattle. A lot of participation from our Haulers Association, and we're really passionate that this rule has to be useful for the entire spectrum of our composting community, as well as other forms of organic waste management. You may or may not know that in statute in Washington, not only materials going to disposal, but materials going to any kind of recycling, including organic recycling, like composting, all fall under the solid waste handling regulations in Washington state. Materials that are being beneficially used, materials that are being land applied, that come from waste sources, materials that are going through composting or other transformative processes are all legally solid waste per statute in Washington state. So whether you have had interaction with regulators in the past or not, whether your only interaction with regulators have been in non-waste management kinds of areas, we do have regulations that apply to both on-farm and off-farm composting operations. So right now, ecology is a year in to our update to WAC 173, 350, which are the solid waste handling standards for the state of Washington. And we're particularly interested not only in all of these updates to the composting standards for permitted facilities, but also on updating the standards for what kinds of facilities can qualify for exemptions. Now, I sometimes hear from small operators, not only on the organic side, but also on the recycling side. Hey, I'm doing something wonderful, something that's really beneficial to the environment. So, why are there any permitting standards that would apply to any operations like mine? And the reason for that is pretty simple. It's the fact that we do have standards that apply to even those operations that have the most oversight, the most complexity, and are doing the most good, such as a transfer station that manages waste that is going to be destined to legal and safe disposal in Washington state. And those operations tend to be very, very well run. They have a lot of different permits that might apply to them. But regardless, they tend to be operated by counties and municipalities, very clean, um, for the most part, very well operated. And that permit that might apply to them helps to ensure that we have appropriate levels of appropriate standards for the management of those materials, appropriate levels of oversight to ensure that those materials are handled correctly. And when it comes to other forms of management, such as composting, we have standards that apply to those commercial composters, to composters that are managing materials over a certain threshold. And it's for the same reason. It's that there is always inherently some level of environmental risk when we're managing waste materials. And at a certain threshold, we need to have the oversight that a permit provides, the more complex set of standards that a permit provides, and also the funding to those jurisdictional health departments that go out and do routine inspections on permitted facilities, whether your county has very low permitting fees or if it's in one of the more urban counties that might have higher permitting fees, that those jurisdictional health departments have some way of at least partially funding some of the work that they do to ensure compliance. And we have a whole suite of options for operations that we feel are small enough, simple enough, um, have a low enough risk to human health and the environment that they can operate without the oversight of a permit. We cannot expect that more complex facilities, that really large facilities operate without that oversight of a permit. So anytime that we're working on updates to our regulations and we're looking at those compost exemptions, we're trying to find the balance. We're trying to find ways to help operators to keep their costs down, to keep the complexity of that environmental regulatory oversight to a minimum. We're trying not to make it more difficult, but at the same time, we're trying to keep that level playing field and say, hey, if we have a yard waste composter that is composting over 2,500 cubic yards of material at a time, if we're getting into even small scale commercial composting, if we're getting into some of the more complex feedstocks at larger volumes, that needs to have that same level of oversight, regardless of whether the overall benefit to society or to a given industry is would be easier or better without that. So that gets us to where we're at right now. Ecology recognizes that we need to have exemptions that help our moderate or smaller scale meat processors and other food processors to be able to manage their materials, particularly as we're seeing fewer and fewer options for rendering and other management of those waste streams at reasonable costs in Washington. So it's important for us to hear from you. And right now, I think the best thing for me to do would be to um, ask, well, maybe not, but um, I'm I don't know if any of the membership here are already familiar with our rulemaking or they have any questions before I dive into the technicalities of where we are at with the rulemaking. But I just wanted to pause here because I'm really good at just talking. So any questions so far or any comments before we get into the nuts and bolts? It's fine if not, but Sarah, I'm assuming that you're checking
Yeah,
chat.
I'm not seeing anything in the chat, but if folks want to follow along, I posted a link to the WAC that's being updated if you want to dive into the code itself, and then also to Ecology's rulemaking page. And on that rulemaking page, there's a bunch of information like where we're at in the process. There's links to comments, and there's a copy of the draft rule language, which I think is what Dawn Marie is going to dive into next. So if you want to follow along,
Great.
that's the place to go.
So we there we go. So, where we're at right now is we have published the first of our complete draft rule language for comment. And we're open for 2 more weeks in our comment period, and we'll circle back around to discussion about that. But we are very much interested in getting feedback from different sectors right now. And unfortunately, we're required by law to have a certain format for all rulemaking in Washington state. And it's not pretty. I have to let everybody know if you want to go, and I encourage you to do that. If you want to go to our draft rule and peruse it at your leisure, I very much encourage you to do so, but it's not the easiest thing to read. We're required to use a red line strikeout system that is very formalized. We are required to use a very specific font with very specific spacing, and it's not very friendly to look at. So I always want to tell people when you open up that draft rule, you're going to see an immense amount of strikeout. There's going to be a lot of red line that says all of this has been changed, all of this has been deleted, and all of the other colored font, it may come up in green or it may come up in blue for you. But normally our strikeout will show up for most people in red, and then new text that has been added will show up in normally blue, but occasionally green. And the reason why you're going to see so much that has changed is because we had to format the current organic standards into the same format as all of the rest of the solid waste standards that were updated in 2018. It's very much just trying to make a more standardized system. So if someone is looking at a material recovery facility standard or a piles for a storage or treatment standard or a composting standard, that they can find the same information in the same section. And if it's trying to say the exact same thing, like you have to manage leachate, then it's going to say it in the same spot under those regulatory standards in each and every one of these sections in the chapter. So, since we were not able to work on the organic standards when we did the last rulemaking, we have had to catch up now and go through all of those organic standards, which are currently the composting standards, the other organic materials management standards, which cover things like black soldier fly production or vermiculture, or if you did aerobic digestion instead of anaerobic digestion. Those are all covered under those standards. We also have a standard for, or standards for anaerobic digesters, both those that are, and for all of these, we have permit exemptions and permit requirements. So when you go looking at the rule, if you open up the composting standards, you're going to see an awful lot of what looks like changes, but the majority of that language is just we had to move this to this spot, we had to standardize language as it's seen in all of the different sections of that rule. And so there are many fewer substantive changes, particularly for composting standards, than it would appear at first glance. Now, another thing to understand, and I do want to pull up the actual rulemaking, I am having a little bit of challenge today. I tried to have this all up ahead of time, and our website wanted to be a little bit touchy, so I'm going to try one more time. I have a backup, um, our working draft that I can pull up, but I'm hoping that this time it's going to be kind to me. Oh, please don't do that. I'm just getting an error.
Let me know if you want me to share it too, Dawn Marie. I've got if
I,
it's,
I it just keeps, yeah, mine just keeps flopping back. If you are able to open and share, that would be great. Otherwise, I can share our working document, which I do have. It's just that it's not in the same, it's our working document. So it has all of those changes, but it also has some more edits. It just won't, it's just not wanting to open for me. It just keeps doing a feedback loop of returning to um, the rule
oh,
page instead of
we
opening.
also we did get one question that I think would be good to address now.
Yeah.
Haley says she's feeling a little bit confused what applies to small farms on-farm compost at this point. Examples have been large commercial composters. Can you clarify how this would apply to my small farm? Am I expected to be permitted now for any on-farm composting?
No, and that's what I'm hoping, are you able to open the
Yeah,
doc?
can you see, do you want the
Yeah.
rulemaking, that draft language?
Yeah, I want the draft language that's
Okay,
okay, there we go. Let's see if we can get that blown up for people.
how's that? Can folks see that okay?
All right. And then if you can go all the way down to the 220 section, which should take you approximately a third of the way
Do you
through.
want this table, Domery?
Yeah, I want to get to table 220A.
That's 215.
I mean, again, if
Okay.
necessary, I can pull up mine. It's just that
Can folks see that? Okay, we're looking at table 220A, terms and conditions for solid waste permit exemptions. Woo!
all right. So if you go up just a little bit, Sarah, I want to get to
Sorry, excuse
right
the
there.
scrolling.
Perfect. Perfect.
Okay.
Okay, so I do want to start by explaining how this table works because most on-farm composting is you're going to have options for exemption. And if those work for you, then I encourage you always to take those exemptions. And if for any reason your operation is going to be better off not being confined to the limitations in our permit exempt options, then permitting is always an option. So when you go to look at the solid waste handling regulations, we're in, again, chapter 173, 350, 220 for the composting standards. Everything is in that Roman numeral system. So it's not again, it's if you're not used to looking at the Roman numeral system, sometimes it can be a little bit hard to figure out where you're supposed to be in order to look at any given thing. But WAC 173, 350, 221 says, hey, this chapter applies to this and it doesn't apply to that. And then WAC 173, 350, 222 starts with, here are all of the conditions for a permit exemption. And here's a table that's going to follow that explains what materials you can handle at what volumes in order to qualify for one of the exemptions. I do want to point out that it's important to read all of Section 2 to understand what applies to exempt operations, and then you stop. Only the requirements in WAC 173, 352, all the way to the end to 3 apply. When you hit 3, 3 is the beginning of all of the permitting standards. So we're going to scroll through all of this in a second, but I would encourage you, if you're considering operating under a compost exemption, to be sure that you read all the way through and understand what applies to you now in the current rule and what we're proposing would apply to you in this draft rule. And one of the important things is that in this first paragraph in 2, it explains that material on site at any one time includes feedstocks, active composting, um, curing materials, and finished materials. It includes all of the material. So it's not just how much material you have in the compost piles at a given time, it's everything on site. So that's how we start off. We explain into that these are the conditions for a permit exemption. Now let's scroll down, Sarah, so that we can get to the meat of all of this, which is table 220A. Okay, so the way that this table works is we have the exemption number over on that far left. And then the second column is going to explain which materials you can manage under that exemption. And then the next column is going to describe any volume restrictions. And then that final column is going to say, if you're using one of these exemptions, these are the things that you're going to have to do. So let's take a look for comparison at that those first two exemptions, exemption 1 and exemption 2. If you are able to operate under one of those very small volume exemptions, which I'm assuming you probably won't be, but let's say that you just do a small like lamb slaughter operation twice a year. You just do, you have a traveling abattoir or whatever, and you're just processing a very small amount of material yourself, maybe you actually don't need more than that volume of 25 cubic yards to manage the very small amount of waste that you generate yourself. Well, guess what? When you look over at exemptions 1 and 2, there are no reporting requirements. You don't have to turn in any forms. You don't have to report to us. It doesn't matter if you distribute your material offsite or not. We're saying that these very small operations are really beyond any expectation that we would have for reporting. And these are meant to cover things like um, home composting and pea patch composting. This isn't just for an operation that in any way is involved with a business or any other commercial entity. These small scale operations do apply to those of us like myself who have home composting. But you're not really interested in that. You're going to be interested in the composting exemptions that we have available right now for meat processors and for farms managing mortalities. So let's scroll down, Sarah. and
And I
try.
do think there probably are a number of folks on this call that would fit in that 10 cubic yards. Because
Yeah.
that's like 4 or 5 pickup truck loads, right? Is about 10 yards or like a large dumpster.
So yeah, most dump trucks are going to be in the 10 to 14 cubic yards. So if you think of a commercial dump truck, a small commercial dump truck is about um, yeah, is going to be about 10 cubic yards, and a large dump truck is going to be about 14 cubic yards.
Yeah,
So
so if you really are only doing a couple animals a year, you may fit in that no notification,
oh,
no
yeah,
standards.
absolutely.
Not
And
no
like
standards, but
and I actually have been contacted by in the past by some farmers that again were doing that small scale management on site, and they absolutely fit underneath one of those exemptions that require no notification, no reporting. There are some requirements that we're going to get to at the very end, past the table, but let's move on. I want to go all the way down to our last exemption, our agricultural exemption, and
the
then we'll
ag
back up.
exemption. And just to clarify, there was a comment from Rebecca in the chat that feedstocks must be generated but on site, but bulking agents, so like your carbon sources, those can be brought in from off-site, correct?
So we don't, if we do not have a restriction that says all material must be generated on site, then it doesn't have to be generated
Okay.
on. So, if that is a restriction, which it is in some exemptions, then that's what it means. But yes, bulking agent
Oh, interesting.
always be
Okay.
imported. Yeah.
Okay.
So a lot of our, I mean, a lot of our exemptions are not restricted to material being generated on site. Some of them are, um, but like that small scale food, yeah, up to 20% food waste, with the 25 cubic yards. That is restricted to on-site because it's meant to be, well, let's not get too deep into that one. Um,
Okay.
but absolutely, you can always import bulking agent. Bulking agent is defined under the definition section in 100. We're talking about wood waste. We're talking about shavings. We're talking about, in some cases, people use like shredded paper. Um, we're talking about carbon sources, and we're not talking about yard debris. You
Hmm.
cannot import yard debris that has a mixture of brush, branches. It could have some, weeding, materials that are generated in the course of maintaining yards and gardens. And again, yard debris is defined under 100. You can't import yard debris. But if it's a tree, if you are taking wood chips, if you are contacting, let's say a local tree service. And after they chip trees at the source where they're maintaining trees, they know they can come and drop off it at your farm. That's absolutely allowed. You just can't slip from that wood waste as defined, which again is includes trees and branches, into yard debris, without then triggering some of these other standards for management of yard debris. But let's go. We
Hmm.
should have
Am I far enough down? No. One
all,
more?
yeah, I think it's not the mass animal mortality. I can't remember if that ended up as our last exemption. I think
Manure and bedding from zoos. So
four.
yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
exemption 7. Ag wastes and bulking agents.
Yeah. So, we do have an exemption available for on-farm composting of agricultural waste. It's okay if that agricultural waste comes from another farm. It just has to be agricultural waste and bulking agent, which can be generated anywhere, that is managed on a farm. And our definition of agricultural waste includes routine mortalities. We specifically have added language around mortalities to the draft definition of agricultural waste to make it clear that we do intend for routine mortalities to be managed routinely on farms. And the other side of that update is we did need to clarify that agricultural waste does not include food processing waste, and that includes meat processing waste. It also doesn't include mass mortalities from disaster events, but we've created an exemption for that. That's not specifically this group, but we have created an exemption to say, hey, sometimes there's a mass mortality event, whether it's a flood, a freeze, we have an outbreak of disease and we need to have a culling event, whatever it is. We do have a specific exemption that is built into the draft regs for that situation, but our routine animal mortalities are covered under the agricultural waste. We're also trying to clarify that you can't have an on-farm slaughter operation at your 10,000 head dairy and importing cattle from, 3 counties away and say, well, that's my on-farm agricultural waste. Those are mortalities. They're not. That's all going to fall under that food processing waste. So what we recognized in the course of the last few years is that we had this gap. We have an unlimited volume of agricultural waste that can be composted on a farm. You can distribute that material off farm. You can sell it. If you fall under that category where you want to be distributing that material, there's some requirements for testing of the material prior to distribution. If you are going to use it back on your farm, then we're going to stay out of it. You do not have to be testing the material for routine management. And that agricultural waste, again, is going to be crop residues, manures, routine mortalities. But what we recognized is that we were missing this point where we have a limited exemption for meat processing. And then we have this big exemption for agricultural composting. But sometimes a farm that has been engaged for a long time in large scale agricultural composting also has a need for some limited composting of their food processing waste, their meat processing waste, and we didn't have a good junction for that. So let's go up to that exemption that we have in draft right now. Here we go. So we have created the first exemption ever in any part of our regulation that is meant to have two different exemptions in the same section of the rule. So two composting exemptions or two recycling exemptions. It's the only one in the entire rule that is meant to double up. And that is our new proposed exemption for meat processing or food processing up to 250 cubic yards of material on site at any time and up to 1,000 cubic yards in a calendar year. This exemption is allowed under this draft rule to be co-located with the agricultural exemption. The only requirement is that you have two distinct areas so that we do not have unlimited volumes of meat processing waste, since there are unlimited volumes of agricultural waste that are allowed under exemption. And we have been grappling with what the right number is for that volume. The current rule has a 250 cubic yard option for feedstocks like meat processing waste. It's not specific to that. But this new exemption would be you could have it off of a farm and stick to that 250 cubic yards at any one time, or you could have it on farm and you could have both your discrete area for managing your meat processing waste, as well as another area where you could manage whatever volume of manure, your routine mortalities, etc. And we really would like to have your input on this proposal. We hope that it's going to meet the needs of more processors, more on-farm processors. We were considering some different numbers as far as that those limits, those volume limits. And we got some pushback because from some health departments where some things have gone south in the last couple of years at a few exempt facilities. So unfortunately, you know how it is. One bad apple can spoil the barrel, and we have had some strong opposition from some health departments to getting this exemption too large because they ended up with some unfortunate cleanup situations where some processors were not managing materials safely and responsibly. But this is still draft. So while those health departments are speaking up, we want to make sure that we hear from the agricultural sector as well. And yeah, if you have any questions right now before we move on to some of the other standards that apply to exempt composting, I would love to answer any questions if I can.
There are a number of questions in the chat. And okay. Okay, when you say site, do you mean a single farm parcel where their main facility may be located, or would site include all of the properties and fields associated with the operation?
It includes everything, and we do have a definition of site specifically to get to that. So it's not like you have one parcel and then here's the next parcel and you can have a replica of that. Yeah. Site is much larger.
Um, Rebecca is saying that the requirements for feedstocks, I think this was in response to the first 10 cubic yards,
Sure.
just a pushback on that feedstocks be generated on site, that most carbon sources like straw or wood chips will come from somewhere else. Um,
And again, bulking agent do not have to be generated on site. Bulking agent is defined, so if you want to go and take a look at it, but it is, and if you feel like that is not clear enough, we want that feedback. Please do provide that, ideally in writing, but even, if just hearing it is good. If it's not clear enough that bulking agent can be generated off-site, bulking agent can always be generated off-site.
okay,
Expecting everyone to grow straw or to have a stand of trees that they regularly chip.
thanks. I appreciate that. And again, and we'll share at the end where you can submit these comments online. But also Dawn Marie is hearing them, and that is good as well. Rachel asks, are bulking agents considered feedstock? Sounds like we just answered that. No, those are different. Um, and Rachel, maybe you want to go back and look at that, and if it's unclear, submit a comment because for exemption 1 and 2, they're called out differently than in 4 and 5, so that may be something to look at.
Yeah, they are. It's total material on site. So material does include bulking agent as it's utilized, but feedstocks, we are intending to say that you have to do good composting. We want you to find the right C to N ratio. The goal here is not to say you can only have whatever material you can generate on site, and that may not be an appropriate C to N ratio. We do expect that most composting operations are going to import bulking agent.
Great. Haley asked, can hay used as animal bedding be considered a bulking agent?
Hay used as animal bedding is going to fall under that agricultural waste.
Waste. Okay. Renee also asked, so for the 10 cubic yard organic feedstock limit, would that be the offal itself?
It's anything that you are using in the composting process.
Okay. Yeah,
So
so it would be the whole pile volume, not just
the
the.
whole pile volume. And again, if you have any feedstocks that have not been incorporated, if you have material that is finished, I will say that sometimes composters find that if they're going to sell material, sometimes they will have a contractual agreement with like a distributor or a wholesaler, and they will ship material, finished material to that site for storage,
Hmm.
in order to not have to, to have a little bit more room for active composting and curing materials that have not yet met the compost quality standards prior to distribution.
Sorry, can I jump in here and get
Yeah,
some
go for it.
clarification? Okay, so I just want to make sure. So meat processing waste is now considered food processing waste, correct? So the offal would fall into this number four exemption.
It gives you that option, yes.
Okay, so if that is the case, then you could really have 250 cubic yards of offal with mixed into compost at one time on a farm?
Correct. And then
Got it.
again, if you're on a farm, you also have the option of having a secondary composting that is discrete. So you could have that whole 250 cubic yards, and then you could have 5,000 cubic yards of manure, crop residue, mortality composting, as long as those two are discrete. And that's the
Okay,
first,
thank you.
yeah.
And we didn't go into this specifically, but there is currently in the draft proposal this 30 days prior to operation requirement to notify Department of Ecology, just so folks are aware that if this ends up in the final rule, that would be the requirement for using that exemption.
And that is in statute, that 30-day prior to operation. The reality is that if you become aware of requirements and you act promptly to fulfill those requirements, that's what we're really interested in. There is language in statute that says all operations under exemption that are required to notify have to do so 30 days prior to operation. Occasionally, of any kind of solid waste handling facility, particularly recycling, organic management, different kinds. Um, Entities will find out after the fact that there are regulations that apply to them. We just want you to send in the form. Just send in the form, and that's the important thing.
Great. Okay, a couple more questions. Is farm defined in the definition section? And can that definition include a small slaughter plant that has some land next to it?
It is no, the definition is farm, and so it's not even farming land. We've had commercial entities in the past that bought farmland in order to avoid composting requirements that were like big companies. So we do define farm in the regulation. We include fish farms, but but that farm definition is for the growing basically of crops and livestock, including um, like not for human consumption livestock. So if you keep horses or goats for fun or something like that, then we do that definition of farm does cover that.
So
Um,
just for clarification, if I have a piece of property that I have animals on and I regularly slaughter on, that would meet the farm exemption.
Almost certainly. You're
Well,
You're asking me a very general question, but I'm gonna say that, if the point is you're raising if you're raising a few goats and you slaughter the goats there and you have a 2 acre hobby farm, we have an option for you. I know that that might not be what, most people are anticipating, but the flip side of that is you can't just have property and say, oh, it is a farm and it's like, oh, this is in the middle of Marysville and you have an acre of land on your parcel. There are some more restrictions. So there's a definition of farm, and what I would say is you need to be able to defend that definition of farm if it is questionable. The burden of proof for solid waste handling in Washington state is on the individual that's handling that material, not on the jurisdictional health department. So
Mm.
if you are saying I am and the health department is saying you're not, the burden of proof is on the manager of that waste to prove that they are or aren't any one thing.
So you defined a farm as a piece of property where animals or for consumption or non-consumption were raised, correct?
I don't have that definition in front of me right now. It's in this draft rule. It's under WAC 173, 350, 100. Happy to look at it, but that's what I'm saying is that you don't take my word for it in this meeting. Look at what that definition is.
Well, so can we find that definition so we can, because I've got some other questions about it.
Well, and these would be good things. I can find the definition. We are coming up to 10:52, and there's a couple more questions in the chat. So I just want to make sure that we can get to everybody, but I will pull up that.
It's
Uh,
right at the very top. If you go all the way to the beginning and then you just go down, it's going to be because it's A. Um, or no, it's farm. Sorry, not agricultural waste. Sorry, farm. My bad.
oh, their main, well, it would be here.
Okay, so while Sarah's looking for that, am I correct to understand that the current regulation is that you can do 250 yards at a time with 1,000 yards annually with offal and your bulking agents, and all you have to do is file an intent to compost.
And for distribution off-site that you have that you have additional testing requirement.
But if you're not taking it off-site, you don't have to do this 30-day notification, or you still have to do that?
You have to notify it's the testing that's optional.
Got it.
So
Yeah.
the big change right now is to add an additional option to have this co-located with the farm exemption, which we've never had before.
Uh, could I ask more about for smaller composting? Um, so for us, we're gonna do special poultry permit on a small property where we brood chickens, and we also want to process them there, and then raising chickens else like 10 minutes away from here where there's actually a pasture. If I put that offal in tubs, like drums, whatever I can use to transport it. If it's Is it okay to like move it back 10 minutes down the road to that pasture where I have my compost heap, and it's not very large, or are there any problems in that?
That's a good question. Um, and the way that the language is currently written, hang on, I'm actually doing this in mine. Um, so you're saying that you have a location where you raise the chickens and then you transport them to a secondary location and then you want to transport the offal back, or did I miss a
Uh, just for that our home spot isn't big enough to raise the chickens on pasture, so we're brooding them for the first 3 weeks of their lives here. Then they go to the pasture, except I can't process them at that pasture. So I'm bringing them back to our spot because we have enough space to process them. But I'm wondering, do I need to have the compost pile in at my small property, or can I take that back to that pasture where there's plenty of space and wood chips?
And are you looking at using the 10 cubic yard exemption under exemption one? Are you looking at
Yeah, I was looking at the 10 cubic yard because we won't be
go for
making
it.
huge amounts.
Go for it.
Great, thank you.
Honestly, that 10 cubic yard is again, that covers home composting. And we're not going to be looking into everyone's backyard and saying, "Oh, did your friend who lives in a apartment building bring you some of that waste? Do you have a little restaurant in town? And when it's so small, when you can, you bring some of that back home again." We we do not want to get involved in that level of management. So, yes. I
Okay.
know we're running
Yep.
short on time. I'm happy to stay after a little bit, but I did want to hit the last after table 220. I do want to explain what happens after table 220. Sorry that we're going back and forth.
Okay. So
I think
after
the definition we have is like on farm as opposed to farm. But so I apologize that we probably needed to look at the O. But let's go down. So after table 220, as I explained, only language in section 2, including table 220A, apply to exempt operations. But right after that table, we have all of the additional requirements for those exemptions. The first one is that you have to apply or comply with the performance standards. The performance standards apply to all facilities, and it is basically thou shalt not pollute. Find a way. Just find a way. We are not going to tell you under these exemptions how you must manage your leachate. We are not going to tell you how you must prevent odors from escaping your property and impacting your neighbors. We're just saying find a way. And if it works, we're happy. If you don't have a release to air, a release to ground, a release to water, we're okay. So essentially the performance standards in 040, which you're welcome to read. It's a short section. Say comply with everybody else's requirements. So if you have to have an air permit, regardless of whether we say you don't have to have a solid waste handling permit, if you have to have an air permit, you have to. If you have to have a water quality permit, you have to. If you have to comply with zoning, local zoning, whatever, you have to. Um, but if you are able to operate under one of our exemptions, just comply with whatever other regulations apply and don't pollute. You have to operate in order to prevent the migration of agricultural pests. That's again in statute. So make sure that you understand what agricultural pests. The big one is that we don't want to be spreading apple maggot, which normally comes in backyard tree prunings, backyard soil from areas that have tree fruit in any of our quarantine areas into our pest-free areas. We have a new requirement farther down, which I can't read, which basically says you need to comply with any restrictions to prevent the spread of disease like chronic wasting disease. So if there is a reason why Department of Fish and Wildlife says it is not safe to be managing these kinds of materials through composting at this time, and any resulting material needs to go to disposal to prevent the risk of spread of disease. You just need to comply with that. And then the rest is just basically the kinds of things like, hey, do something to ensure that every dog in the neighborhood isn't coming over and pulling out, a calf leg. Make sure that you don't have rats running all over and carrying off, material to neighboring farms, that you're not breeding super rats. Just do basic kind of housekeeping. And as long as we don't get complaints, no one's going to be coming in and making sure that you are meeting these requirements. So that's my kind of overview. And again, any of the language that occurs after Section 2, from Section 3, which is location standards, all the way to the end, to our financial assurance, groundwater monitoring, which no composting facility has to have, closure requirements, all of that only applies to facilities that are operating under a solid waste handling permit. And once more, I will say it may be that you would have a better operation for your business that if you are operating under a permit, such as I want to be bigger than 250 cubic yards. I'm not on a farm. I want to be importing, slaughter waste from other farms, from other operations. I want to have something that fits my business needs. Great. We have a permitting option, and in most parts of the state, that permitting is not going to be overly onerous. The hiccup is usually the air agency, not the solid waste handling requirements. Some parts of the state, the requirements from the air agency get a little complicated fast. But most of the state, that's not going to be true. So again, we always encourage you to look at those exemptions and see if one of those will work for your operation. You're always able to call either your jurisdictional health department in your county, or if you just have questions about the regulations, you can call or email any of the solid waste facilities specialists at the Department of Ecology. I'm in the Northwest region, but there's one of us in all three regions. We're free. You can call us and ask for technical assistance. We can't write a farm plan for you. We can't fill out, a form completely for you, but we can direct you. We can help explain what the regulations mean. And especially right now, if there are areas that are unclear, like this says all feedstocks on site, but then you're telling me that bulking agents can be imported, that's important for us to know, because while our intent may be clear in our head, if it's not clear to our stakeholders, then we're not going to have as usable of a rule.
Mhm.
And with that, I know we're a little over time. Sarah, I don't know if you need to end the call or if you wanted to hold on for a little bit longer for any additional um, questions. That's up to you. I'll turn it over to Sarah to decide what happens next.
Thank you, Dawn Marie. I did, before folks have to go, and I apologize, we're 3 minutes over, but if you can stay on, I think we'd be happy to answer more questions. Dawn Marie, if you're available. But I wanted to make sure that folks understood where to comment on this. So on the link that I shared, Department of Ecology's website, you can put in written comments. We're in comment period October 21st to December 12th. You open the form. You do have to fill out some information. Addresses and city is not required, but then you can upload what comments. So if there's a part of this, the proposed rule right now that you don't think is going to work for you, or something is unclear, like Dawn Marie was saying, please put in a comment. And then just for folks' awareness, so we are in this comment period right now. Dawn Marie, as I understand, the next step is that Ecology will look at these comments, make any changes, and then issue a formal proposed rule, at which point it'll go into another public comment period. Is that correct?
That's correct. If the nature of the changes that we make, we feel it's necessary to have another round of informal comments, we will add that in. If the nature of our changes are that it's appropriate then to move to the formal comment period, then we'll just go ahead and stick with that plan.
Yeah, so this is your chance. If you have questions or input on this comment, this is your chance to make your voice heard, to say, what's not going to work for you, what's unclear, what would you like to see. Can't promise that they'll all make it into the final rule, but definitely this is your chance to share, yeah, what your thoughts on this. There may be other chances, but certainly if you have the opportunity between now and December 12th, um, please put in a comment. Um,
And
you're
and
welcome to reach out to Dawn Marie if you have additional clarifying questions before or after that. And there's limited what I can do as a co-agency partner. Like I can't put in a comment for you, but we can kind of work through things together if you need help with this process.
And again, I'm available not only for any questions about the current rule process, but also to help you if you are trying to understand how the regulations apply to you right now. You're looking to utilize either an exemption or to potentially move into a permitting scenario. I'm happy to set you up with additional um, contacts and to explain the regulations. And again, I have counterparts in all 3 other regions of Washington State who are also happy to help. And
Great.
with
Can
Let
I
me find
ask a
them.
quick question?
Yeah, go for it, Rachel.
So while I have you here, Dawn Marie, thank you for this. Thank you for going over it. And I know, yeah, there's a little bit of, it definitely takes some going back and forth between the table and the definitions and that sort of thing. So I had it the first time, but then seeing it again. So while you're here, I just want to clarify maybe something that might apply to some people here. So in the table 220A, that exemption about meat processing waste, and because you mentioned something similar when you were talking about this. So because that now the draft language would allow for, let's say you are a processor,
yes,
so you are composting as that entity though, even you're not importing slaughter waste from other processing facilities, but you are processing other people's animals
yes,
at your facility, but you are composting as that entity. So if you stay under the 250 cubic yard limit,
yes.
that is a condition that is now exempt from permitting, meeting those on other standards though listed here.
Absolutely.
Great.
Only those first 2 exemptions that were supposed to be on site because we were trying, but
Yep.
again, at 10 cubic yards, we're not really paying that much attention. It's but all the rest of the exemptions are not restricted to materials on site, and definitely not that 250 cubic yard of meat processing, food processing waste. That's intended to be for small scale operations that are importing animals. 100%.
Great. Okay. I think that will help a lot of folks. Thank you.
Yeah,
So
thank you for clarifying that, Rachel. That's awesome.
yeah, so just for clarification, because my understanding previously was I could compost my own slaughter waste from my own animals. But if I took in animals or slaughter waste from a separate farm, someone other than my own animals, I had to be permitted. Is that now changing?
That was not the case before. I'm sorry if it was misrepresented or misunderstood, but there were limits. So it might be that the hiccup there was that the limits were more were, that you needed to operate above those limits.
I,
So yeah, the
yeah, I
proposed
think you were
limit
large
right
enough.
now is 250 cubic yards at any one time and up to 1,000 cubic yards in a calendar year under the exemption. Whether those animals are, from your own farm or not, and that it can be co-located with a farm exemption, but again, you can't move slaughter waste over into your on-farm agricultural waste unlimited volume exemption. So that's not really changing. That, that 250 cubic yard, our proposed, our draft proposal is still for that same limit. It just allows both of those exemptions to be co-located.
So it doesn't matter whose animals they are, just as long as we meet and abide by the volume requirements.
Correct. Yeah, it did not before, and it does not now.
Interesting. Okay.
A hand Wangle, W
Yeah,
Angel.
hi. I
Sorry.
forgot.
Hey, Bill.
Hi, Bill Angel here with Whatcom County Health, and it's appreciate this availability and getting a chance to engage here. One one thing was that I had wanted to have clarified was around that very particular issue, and just in my read of my sense is this is a spot where having some vetting about the local planning and zoning allowances is going to be crucial before just beginning 30 days after sending a notification, because I think that could really, there's a potential that the planning rule or whatever zoning law might really come into play here.
Bill is absolutely right. And this, unfortunately, is something that ecology's rulemaking has no authority over. Local zoning is hyper local. And sometimes we find definitions in local zoning code that really don't align with current practices. We have found old language in local zoning code that automatically assumes that if you are a solid waste handling facility, that you are a landfill or transfer station. And we have language in some local code that says, well, if you're permitted, then you might need to have a conditional use, a land use conditional use permit if you have a solid waste handling permit. But if you operate under a permit exemption, you don't. It's not the same. It's not the same from jurisdictions sometimes that are adjacent to each other. We're very sorry. This isn't anything that the solid waste handling regulations can address at all. But we have also found that sometimes if you work between your local land use agency and your health department, especially if you can make connections between that local land use agency and some others in that county or in an adjacent county that have similar kinds of land use in a given area. Sometimes that can help to ease the concerns about siting a given facility. And we have seen in certain situations that led to changes in local code over time, or expedited or other kinds of allowances for land use permits.
And that again is something that we can troubleshoot together. I've worked with some counties in the past, not specific to the composting issue, but in other land use issues to understand, what the code is. And we're actually hoping to be able to make an update in King County's code in this coming year to allow for on-farm slaughter. So it's not a quick process, but you're not alone in that process.
And we
Sarah,
understand it can be frustrating.
Sarah and Don, a quick comment. Greg Newhall, Windy and Ranch in Ellensburg. Reading all the wax can cause a lot of brain damage. It'll get you
Yes.
questions and answers. Department of Ecology, in my experience, has been wonderfully helpful. They are solving problems, not trying to create problems. Just a great experience with a governmental agency in trying to get a solution rather than putting up roadblock blocks. So any questions, Department of Ecology people will be a great resource.
Well,
Thank you, Greg.
We try. We recognize that sometimes we fall short, but we want to have workable solutions that are also fair and equitable um, to stakeholders across many different management options. And so we're trying. And this rule is a great opportunity for making improvements that are going to help this industry. So we do need to hear from you.
Thank you for that, Greg. I promise everybody else we didn't pay him to say that.
Apologies for not being able to raise my hand. I'm technically challenged and didn't know how to bleed in.
Yeah, and
All
my
good.
my counterparts in Central and Eastern both have deep ag and ag management roots. So I think if you speak to them, I mean, I just have an 18-acre hobby farm, but I have a 4-bin composting system where I manage all of my manure as well as my yard debris. I've got 4 10 by 12 bays, and I do a turned system, a static turned system. So I also incorporate all of the food waste from my house and any of um, my bird mortalities or slaughter. So I'm not a large scale processor. I'm not a commercial processor, but I am a lifelong composter as well.
And I want to make sure that we're just being conscious of time, but there was one. I think we've answered most of the questions in the chat, but there was a request. Dawn Marie, do you have a copy of the form that you would have to fill out to notify ecology?
Well, if someone emails me, I'm very happy to send them a link. If you go to you can find it in a bunch of different ways, but like if you went to the Department of Ecology and you went to the organic management page, there's going to be a link on that one to forms, including the notice of intent. If you go to the full solid waste page, if you do a search for solid waste forms, there's a bunch of different ways to get there. But again, if you email me, I am very happy to send you a link to that notice of intent form. And there's a page that has boxes that you check for the exemption or exemptions that you're going to use. And so you just start by looking down and making sure you know which exemption applies to you. Don't check the on-farm agricultural exemption at unlimited volume if what you really mean is that you're going to use the smaller exemption for meat processing waste. But that's one that I'm happy to be online or be on the phone with someone and walk you through that form. There are there's some places where you're going to have a little bit of description, but I'm happy to explain, what all goes there. And then you can email or hard copy mail that back. One copy goes to ecology and one copy goes to the jurisdictional health department.
And I'm happy, I think as a follow-up to this call, I'll send out some information about the comment period and I'll also send out a link to that form so that folks have it. Dawn Marie, do you have 2 more minutes?
I do. I mean, I'd love to wrap up soon, but I do have,
Okay.
another question or two. Happy to try to wrap it up and give people what insight I can.
And this is a question from Rebecca, and this is just one thing that we didn't touch on. I think table 225, which is what set of WAC rules apply to small slaughter plants that don't have a farm but want to do in-vessel or small aerobic digester. And that is also a new addition. So if we could just look at that for like 1 minute so folks know where to find it, that'd be super helpful.
Absolutely. And you know what? If you had an anaerobic digester, and you wanted to use that, there are a bunch of like off the shelf, small scale anaerobic digesters that are meant for managing some of these more complex waste. There are some aerobic digesters or like in-vessel systems. Composting can be an in-vessel system. I have seen some, specific to slaughter waste in-vessel composting systems. But if you have something that's not really aerobic composting, it's not anaerobic digestion, 225 is meant to capture anything else. And we tried to have similar exemption volumes in the different sections. But here's the thing, there's more risk when it's a liquid. So we do, anytime that we're talking about a tank that is going to manage semi-solids or liquid material, not like an enclosed flat bed that's meant to be mostly solids, but like a tank that is most anything that will flow. Not just that has leachate coming off it, but anything that flow. It does have a higher risk associated for environmental impact because if it hits the ground, it's going to want to run towards a ditch, basically, or a drain. So we do have a little bit more restrictions there. But yeah, table 225A is meant to have exemptions that will cover some other ways that you might manage material. It's got that first one, which is any kind of material, any way that you want to manage it. We're not going to say how it is. We have some specific for vermiculture and other beneficial bugs like black soldier fly production. And then we do have I think it's the last exemption or not, it's the second to last because it's not the mortality one. All organic feedstocks and yeah, it's not the last one, it's the second to last because that's the last one is the mass mortality. And that's like you want to put it, that one is specific to in vessel, and it's pretty robust. If you're going to keep it in a vessel, it gives you some, some options for materials. And there again, there are some restrictions on testing if you're going to distribute. The big thing about the testing there is going to be our new requirement for physical contaminants. Probably you're going to have very clean feedstocks if you're managing slaughter waste, but we're trying to be fair across the board because the compost industry is screaming. So they're like, if we have to have clean, then everybody has to have clean. And we're like, sure, we'll just tell everybody that their finished feedstocks have to be free of physical contaminants. So yes, absolutely, the exemptions under 225 are meant to be utilized if you don't have something that fits comfortably into either 220 for composting, an aerobic process, or 250 for anaerobic digestion.
Awesome. Thank you. That is, yeah, a section that I think is relevant to another portion of this audience. So I appreciate having that as part of this recording.
Sarah, I just have one more quick question.
All right.
Can you give an example or a definition of a routine mortality?
Oh,
I don't remember if we had that clarified. I think we actually have some language around that, but it's meant to be, we understand that that there's going to be animals on the farm that don't make it for one reason or another. It doesn't say that you can't have euthanized that animal. It doesn't say it had to die of natural causes. More, we're trying to differentiate routine mortalities from either mass mortalities or from meat processing waste or other food processing waste. So if it's leftover from slaughter, even if it's just bones and hide, that's still meat processing waste.
And
We intentionally did not use offal because we found that most regular definitions of offal are confined to those organ meats, etc. If you look in a dictionary, that's what you're usually going to find as your first definition. And two, it's not a very accessible term for people outside of industry. So we started with maybe slaughter waste and heard that that was not as popular for a term. So we're currently sitting on meat processing waste. If anyone prefers a different term for some reason, we're also open to that. This is the first time that we have created that term, and it is defined. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Dawn Marie, for hanging on for so long. I make a note that I should have scheduled this for at least an hour and a half. But yeah, we really appreciate it. And again, folks, this is a draft rulemaking. And so again, this is your opportunity. Please comment, share your thoughts, good, bad, indifferent. And we'll go from there. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and again, we love if you like something, don't be afraid to tell us you like it because somebody else might not. And if we only hear from the people who don't like something, and then we have a majority of people who do but didn't bother to say something, that's when we risk having something changed that generally was popular but someone was noisy about.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Dawn Marie. That's great. And I will try to get this. I will stop the recording